Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling AI, artificial intelligence, and a pioneer you could say is fascinating at least, Geoffrey Hinton.
And he has this thing, you see, where he can't sit down. It's, well, we'll get into it.
Okay, now that's got to be a story. But even if you think algorithms are on the menu at a fancy restaurant, this deep dive's for you, trust me.
Absolutely. Because this is about how one man's vision, his ideas, they're in how we use tech every single day.
No way. Okay, so from what I've picked up, Hinton's journey, it didn't start in some Silicon Valley garage, right? It started with a really big question.
It did. It really did.
Yeah.
And that question was, how does the brain learn? Not a computer, the human brain. That's
Yeah.
what grabbed him.
That's wild. See, back in the 80s, AI research, it was all about rules, like giving computers this huge instruction manual step by step.
Right. Very rigid. But Hinton, he was picturing something totally different.
So instead of programming every tiny detail, what if, and this is what I love about this stuff, what if computers could learn like we do?
You've got it. So not just labeled data, like here's a cat, here's a dog, but artificial neural networks. And these networks, they'd be able to go through mountains of data
Yeah.
and teach themselves the patterns, like how a kid learns, basically.
So way less like, rigid programming and way more like giving the computer the ability to, what, teach itself.
Exactly.
Is that deep learning then? Because these networks, they have layers and layers, right? Like getting into really complex stuff.
Exactly. Think of each layer as a step up in understanding. So those early layers, they might just be detecting simple lines, but those later layers,
Yeah, those later layers.
they're recognizing whole objects like a face, a car, mirroring how our brains do it, but with way more math behind the scenes, of course.
Yeah.
But back then, most people, they thought this was a dead end,
And Hinton being Hinton, I'm guessing he said, hold my coffee and just went for it.
or basically. See, training those deep networks, that was the real challenge. Imagine trying to teach a computer to spot a cat in a photo. There's a million variables.
Oh, yeah, the cat could be doing anything.
Exactly. But the big breakthrough, backpropagation. And this is where it gets really cool.
All right, so break it down for us. Backpropagation, what's the big deal?
Okay, imagine you're learning to shoot hoops, right? Every time you miss, your brain, it's analyzing what went wrong, the angle, how much force,
Yeah.
and then you adjust your next shot.
You get better with practice? Makes sense.
Well, backpropagation does that for neural networks. It figures out which connections inside all those layers led to a wrong answer, and then, boom, fine-tunes them.
So the network's getting smarter, more accurate every single try, just like us practicing our jump shots.
Exactly. So instead of getting stuck if the initial programming wasn't perfect, the network's learning from its mistakes.
That's incredible. But how did this like out there idea become this huge thing in AI?
So Hinton's early work, he was using these deep networks for speech recognition, and it was hinting at what might be possible.
Yeah, the potential was there.
Right. But what really changed everything, three things all came together. Backpropagation, way more data suddenly being available, and computers powerful enough to handle all these crazy calculations.
Oh, wow. So Hinton's ideas, they weren't just theory anymore. They were actually working.
And working really well. Suddenly, everyone was paying attention.
I bet. The big tech companies, they must have been freaking out.
Oh, yeah. Remember that bidding war for Hinton's company back in 2012?
I think I read about that, yeah.
It was insane. Google, Microsoft, Baidu, they were all throwing money at him. Google ended up buying his company, though. $44 million.
That's more than just someone having a good idea. That's seeing how big that idea could be.
Absolutely. This wasn't just about making speech recognition better. This was about, like, changing how computers understand the world around them.
Which brings us to, well, everywhere. Think about it. Our phones, how we search online, it's all deep learning now. And it all goes back to this one guy.
Who dared to imagine computers that could learn like we do?
Okay, that is seriously cool. But how does this actually work in the real world? Because we're not just talking about science fiction here, right?
Not at all. Let's get into some of the tangible ways Hinton's work is playing out.
We're talking about self-driving cars, right? Like being able to navigate traffic, make decisions. That's got to be deep learning at work.
You got it. Those cars, they're using deep learning algorithms trained on tons of driving data to understand their surroundings, make split-second choices. It's really incredible stuff.
It really is. But it's not just tech, right? I've heard about this stuff. Deep learning impacting medicine, too.
Absolutely. We're talking about revolutionizing healthcare, things we couldn't have imagined a few years ago.
Like what? Give us the good stuff.
Okay, so picture this. Deep learning analyzing medical images, things like x-rays, scans, and get this, sometimes even better than human experts.
No way.
Oh, yeah. It's leading to earlier diagnoses, potentially saving lives.
Wow, so it's like having like a whole team of super doctors working behind the scenes. But it's not just images, right? I read something about predicting how proteins fold, which sounds insanely complicated.
It is complex, but that's what makes it so groundbreaking. So figuring out how proteins fold, that's key to understanding how diseases work, how to develop new drugs.
Well, right. It's like those 3D models you see.
Exactly. And these deep learning algorithms, they're getting really good at predicting these structures, speeding up drug discovery. It could change how we approach personalized medicine.
That's amazing. It's crazy to think the same tech in our phones is like unlocking these mysteries of biology. But as amazing as all this is, are there any downsides to deep learning?
Of course, there are always limitations. Look, these deep learning models, they're super powerful, but they're not perfect. One big thing they struggle with is common sense.
Common sense.
Yeah, like they can beat a chess grandmaster, no problem, but understanding a simple joke, that can trip them up.
So, super smart in some ways, but still kind of clueless in others.
That's a good way to put it. Plus, there's the issue of bias. Remember, these models, they learn from massive data sets. If that data has biases in it, the model can actually pick those up, even amplify them.
Oh, so it's not just the tech itself, it's the data we feed it. That's a big deal. Which, brings us back to Hinton. His story, it's not just about lines of code, it's about changing how we think about intelligence itself.
100%. He challenged everyone, showed them that instead of telling computers everything, you could actually mimic how the brain learns, and the results are mind-blowing.
Totally. Do you remember that quote of his? Something like, "We used to be the crazy ones, now we're the heart of it all."
He said, "We ceased to be the lunatic fringe. We're now the lunatic core."
Uh,
I love that quote
yeah.
because it shows how he stuck with it, even when people thought he was off his rocker.
And now look at where we are. But learning about Hinton, his background, it makes you wonder, was this guy destined for greatness or what?
It's an interesting thought. I mean, his great-great-grandfather was George Boole,
Wait, the George Boole, like Boolean logic, the stuff computers are built on?
the one and only. And it doesn't stop there. His dad was a big-time entomologist, studied insects, and his great-grandfather, get this, he was obsessed with the fourth dimension.
Okay, that's just wild. Makes you think nature versus nurture, right? Was it in his genes to be brilliant, or was it his environment that pushed him?
Probably a bit of both, Like maybe the potential was there, but he needed that environment, that encouragement to think differently, take risks.
Like that saying, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Hinton had the inspiration, but he also put in the work, even when nobody else got it.
But speaking of inspiration, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Deep learning's come so far. What's next?
That's the million-dollar question. Some folks think we're on the verge of even bigger breakthroughs. Imagine AI that can not only learn, but reason, plan, solve problems like we do, but even better.
Okay, now that's getting a little sci-fi. I know, right? But think about it. AI designing scientific experiments, composing music, maybe even writing books. It's mind-blowing.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. Exciting, but kind of scary too, right? Like, we're entering this whole new world, and we have no idea what's waiting for us.
Exactly. But here's the thing, Hinton's journey. It's far from over, but he's already changed everything. It's not just about code, it's about how we learn, what intelligence means, even what makes us human.
Deep stuff. So to wrap this up, someone's listening to this, they're inspired, they want to dive into AI themselves. Where should they start?
The great thing is, there's never been a better time. We've got tons of online resources, courses, communities, all about making AI accessible.
So, like, no matter who you are, there's a way in.
Exactly. Find what you're into. You like language. Check out natural language processing. Art's your thing. See how AI is changing creativity. The possibilities are endless.
I love that. So maybe, just maybe, the next Geoffrey Hinton's out there, listening right now, ready to ask those big questions, change the world.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
It sure would. Big thanks to everyone for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Geoffrey Hinton and the incredible rise of deep learning. We'll back next time with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those questions coming, keep diving deep, and most importantly, keep learning. It's like Hinton gave us this, this amazing toolbox, but now we get to decide what to build, and that's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets even more interesting. See, it's not just don't make AI evil, although obviously that's important.
Yeah, no robot overlords if we can help it.
Right. But it's bigger than that. It's about what happens when a machine is making choices that affect people. That's huge.
It's like we're writing new philosophy at the same time we're writing code. It's kind of poetic in a way.
I like that because if AI is diagnosing diseases, maybe even figuring out treatments, who decides what's right? Who's responsible if something goes wrong?
Those are big questions.
And they're not just what if anymore. They're happening now. We need answers, and fast.
And not just from the tech people, right? This feels like something we all need to be talking about.
Absolutely. We need philosophers, ethicists, people who study how societies work, even artists. Everyone's got a stake in this. Because what values do we want AI to have? How do we make sure it's used for good? These aren't just tech questions anymore. They're human questions.
It's like learning to code's one thing, but now we need, like, human skills to figure out how to use it all. Maybe that's the biggest part of Hinton's legacy.
That's a good point. It's not just the tools he gave us, it's the questions he made us ask. What does being intelligent even mean? And what are we going to do with this intelligence we're building?
Wow, yeah. That's a lot to think about. So if someone's listening to this, they're totally hooked on this stuff, maybe they want to get their hands dirty with AI, where do they even begin?
You know what's awesome? There's never been a better time to jump in. We've got online resources coming out our ears, courses, groups, all about AI, and it's for everyone.
So no matter what your background is, there's a way in.
Totally. Find what you're into. Languages, you've got natural language processing, love art. AI and creativity is blowing up. It's all out there.
That's really cool. So maybe, just maybe, the next Hinton's out there right now listening to us, ready to ask the big questions, change the world.
Wouldn't that be something?
It really would.
Oh.
Huge thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into Geoffrey Hinton and the world of deep learning. We'll be back next time with more fascinating stories, but until then, keep those brains working, keep asking questions, and as always, keep on